There are moments in life when you look back and think, wow, that was the exact second everything went to hell. Some people have those moments in hospital rooms, some in courtrooms, and some in the middle of a flaming car crash. Me? Mine happened in a steakhouse. Let me set the scene. It's Friday night, and I'm sitting across from my wife, Liza, at Vincent's Prime Steakhouse, the kind of place that charges you for the privilege of breathing their overpriced, dry-aged air. The waiter, whose name is probably Pierre or something equally pretentious, is pouring us wine that costs more than my monthly car insurance, and Liza is sitting there, looking at me with that tight, polite smile women give when they're about to tell you something you won't like. "Mike," she says, picking at her Caesar salad like she's performing surgery, "I have something to tell you." Now, before I go on, let me just say, I am not a dumb man. I know this tone. This is the please don't cause a scene in public tone. The I'm about to drop a bombshell but let's pretend we're adults tone. So, naturally, I brace myself. "I'm pregnant," she says. A moment of silence. Then I blink. Then I blink again. Now, under normal circumstances, this would be wonderful news. The problem is, I had a vasectomy 3 years ago. I stare at her. She sips her wine. The restaurant is suddenly too loud, too bright, too suffocating. The waiter, bless his useless soul, chooses this exact moment to return to the table. Would Sir like another refill on his wine? Sir would, in fact, like a refill. Sir would like the entire goddamn bottle. Maybe two. But instead, I clear my throat and say, "Liza, darling, would you like to repeat that?" I think my ears malfunctioned. She has the audacity to sigh like I'm the difficult one. I said I'm pregnant. I lean back in my chair. Huh. That's all I can manage. Huh. Because my brain is currently short-circuiting between heaven and hell. She cheated on me, and maybe this is just a medical miracle, and I'm about to be on the cover of some science magazine. Spoiler alert, it was not a miracle. I put my fork down. Losing my appetite at Vincent's Prime Steakhouse should have been my first clue that this night was going to be legendary in the worst way possible. I mean, I was about to drop $80 on a steak, and now I was sitting here trying to figure out if I had a defective vasectomy or if my wife was just really, really bad at keeping secrets. Liza looked at me like I was supposed to say something. Maybe congratulate her. Maybe jump across the table and kiss her belly like those guys in movies who are too dumb to realize the kid isn't theirs. Instead, I wiped my mouth with my napkin, took a deep breath, and said, "That's interesting." She blinked. "Interesting? Well, yeah. Considering the whole, I got snipped 3 years ago situation." To her credit, she didn't even flinch. Just took another sip of her wine and placed the glass down so gently you'd think she was handling an ancient artifact. "Mike, don't be dramatic." I stared at her. "Oh, I'm sorry, am I overreacting? I must have forgotten that biology is just a suggestion now." She sighed. A long, deep sigh. The kind of sigh that made me want to flip the table just to get a real reaction out of her. "Look," she said, her voice taking on that patient tone she used when she thought I was being stupid. "We don't know for sure that your procedure was 100% successful." I leaned forward. "We do, actually, because I remember the doctor calling me after my follow-up test and telling me, 'Mike, congratulations, your boys have officially retired.' Doctors make mistakes. And yet here we are, with me not being the one who made the mistake." Her fingers tightened around her wine glass, and for a second, I actually thought she was going to throw it in my face. That would have at least made things interesting. Instead, she leaned in like she was about to tell me a secret, and in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Do you really want to do this here?" I glanced around. Couples clinking glasses. Some old guy slicing into a steak that looked better than my marriage. A waiter balancing a tray with 3 desserts. She was right. I didn't want to do this here. But I also didn't want to sit through dessert pretending everything was fine. So I did what any rational, mature man would do in my situation. I grabbed my fork and took a giant bite of my mashed potatoes. She could wait. Liza let out another one of those sighs and reached for her purse. "I'll be in the car." Good. That gave me a few minutes to strategize. Step 1. Finish my meal, because no matter how badly my life was falling apart, I refused to do it on an empty stomach. Step 2. figure out what the heck I was going to say when I got to the car. Spoiler alert, there was no step 3. 15 minutes later, I walked out of the restaurant to find Liza sitting in the passenger seat of our SUV. Scrolling through her phone like this was just another Tuesday night. I slid into the driver's seat and shut the door. "So," I said, resting my hands on the wheel, "you want to tell me who the lucky father is, or do I get 3 guesses?" She didn't look up. "Mike, let's not make this uglier than it has to be." "Oh, I agree. That's why I'm giving you the chance to come clean before I start throwing names out. Don't be ridiculous." "Oh, I'm way past ridiculous, sweetheart. I'm 2 exits away from losing my mind completely." She finally looked at me. "Fine. You want the truth? The baby is yours." I laughed. I actually laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made me wonder if I was about to have an aneurysm. "Liza, you do understand how human reproduction works, right?" Her jaw tightened. "I don't have to sit here and be insulted." "No, but you do have to sit here and explain how I got you pregnant without functional equipment." She exhaled through her nose, like I was being unreasonable. "Maybe the vasectomy reversed itself. That happens in, what, 1 in 10,000 cases? Well, maybe you're that one." "Oh, I'm definitely one of something." Silence. Thick and heavy. I stared straight ahead, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "Liza, I swear to you, if you sit there and keep lying to my face, I'm going to—" "What?" she snapped. "You're going to yell? Call me names? Kick me out of the car?" "No," I took a deep breath. "I'm going to turn this car around, drive back to the steakhouse, and order the biggest dessert on the menu, because I refuse to deal with this on an empty stomach." She scoffed. "Oh, so now you're making jokes? Would you prefer I cry?" She went quiet. I nodded. That's what I thought. Then, just as I was about to start the car, she whispered, "It was Chris." It took me a second, then another, and then it hit me like a freight train. Chris, my best friend, my best man at our wedding. The guy who sat in my living room every Sunday, drinking my beer, watching football, and talking about how he was practically family. I turned my head slowly, very slowly, and looked at her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. There are a lot of things a man can handle in life. Losing his job, getting into a car accident, even watching his team lose the championship in the last 5 seconds of a game. But finding out his wife is carrying his best friend's baby? That's the kind of thing that flips a switch inside you. I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I had just made a decision. And Liza? She had no idea what was coming next. I stared at her, and she stared at the dashboard like she was hoping it would open up and swallow her whole. Chris, my best friend, my so-called brother, the guy who had been at my side for 15 years, through thick and thin, through every stupid thing I'd ever done, the guy who was supposed to have my back. And now, he had my wife, and my seat at the next PDA meeting. I took a deep breath. "So," I said, voice calm, steady, almost too normal, "how long?" She crossed her arms. "Does it matter?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I needed to do something before I punched the steering wheel so hard the airbag knocked me out. "Yeah, Liza, it actually does. Humor me." She exhaled sharply. "Almost a year. A year. A year of him sitting on my couch, pretending to be my friend. A year of her kissing me goodbye in the morning and probably meeting him for lunch. A year of me being the idiot in this story." "Nice," I muttered. "Real nice." She shifted uncomfortably. "Mike, I held up a hand. "Nah, don't. You already used up all your words for the night." I grabbed my phone and pulled up my contacts. Chris was listed as Chris, brother from another mother. That aged well. I tapped his name, and it rang. Liza's eyes widened. "What are you doing? What do you think?" Chris picked up on the third ring. "Mike, buddy, what's up?" I smiled. "Hey, Chris. Quick question. When were you planning on telling me you make pregnant my wife?" Silence. Beautiful, guilty silence. Then, a nervous chuckle. "Mike, man, I hung up." Liza turned to me, panicked. "Mike, what are you?" I called again. He picked up immediately. "Did you think she wasn't gonna tell me?" I asked, leaning back in my seat like we were discussing the weather. Or were you hoping to keep this a secret until the baby showed up with your dumb face? Mike, listen. Click. Hung up again. Liza groaned. Are you done? Nope. I hit redial. This time, he didn't answer. Smart. Liza rubbed her temples. Can we just go home and talk about this? I turned to her, and for the first time, I really looked at her. I wasn't seeing my wife anymore. I wasn't seeing the woman I married. I was looking at a stranger who had thrown away everything we built for. What? A few laughs with Chris? A fun little secret behind my back? She was waiting for me to react, to yell, to cry, to beg, but I wasn't giving her that. I nodded. Sure, let's go home. The drive back was quiet. She kept stealing glances at me like she was expecting an explosion, but I just stared straight ahead. There was nothing to say. When we pulled into the driveway, she hesitated before getting out. Mike, I stepped out and walked into the house. The second I was inside, I grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. The home screen lit up. Netflix, Prime Video, and then Hulu. Logged into Chris's account. I grinned. The little things really do add up. Liza walked in behind me, arms crossed. Are we really going to pretend everything's fine? I grabbed the remote and hovered over his profile. Nope. Then I deleted it. She threw her hands in the air. Really, Mike? Hey, if I can't get my dignity back, I can at least take away his Family Guy binge-watching privileges. She groaned and walked into the kitchen. I followed. The house smelled normal. Looked normal. But it wasn't. This was the same house where I thought I had a wife who loved me. A life that was solid. Now, it was just a set piece for the world's worst sitcom. Liza turned to face me. Are we just going to act like this doesn't change anything? Oh, it changes everything, I said, leaning against the counter. Just not in the way you want. She frowned. What does that mean? I took a deep breath. It means I'm not the one leaving, Liza. You are. Her eyes widened. Excuse me? I nodded toward the stairs. Go pack a bag. She laughed. Oh, you think you can just kick me out? I shrugged. I own the house. Your name's not on it. Legally, yeah, I can. Her mouth opened and closed, like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Mike, be reasonable. Reasonable? I raised an eyebrow. You spent a year with Chris and you're asking me to be reasonable? She grabbed the back of a chair. I am pregnant. With Chris's kid, not mine. She flinched. I took a step closer. Pack. A bag. She stood there, jaw clenched, chest rising and falling like she was debating whether to throw something at me. Then, finally, she turned and stormed up the stairs. I let out a breath. I had no idea what tomorrow was going to look like. No idea how this whole mess was going to unfold. But one thing was for sure. Chris was next on my list, and I had plans for him. Liza was upstairs packing, probably throwing things into a bag like she was the victim in all of this. I could already hear drawers opening and closing a little too aggressively. I took my time, poured myself a drink, sat down at the kitchen table, and scrolled through my phone. I had a plan, and I wanted to make sure every part of it went exactly the way I wanted. Chris, my best friend, my so-called brother, the man who had spent the last year eating my food, laughing at my jokes, acting like he wasn't sneaking around with my wife behind my back. I scrolled through my text with him. Just last week, he had sent me a meme about loyalty, the kind of generic motivational nonsense people post when they want to sound deep but are really just insecure. Loyalty isn't a word, it's a lifestyle. I smiled. Perfect. I saved the screenshot. Liza stomped down the stairs with a duffel bag over her shoulder. She stopped at the bottom step and looked at me like I was supposed to say something. Maybe beg her to stay. Maybe tell her we could fix this. I pointed at the door. You need a written invitation? She rolled her eyes. I'll be back for the rest of my stuff. No rush. She hesitated. And where exactly am I supposed to go? I shrugged. Chris's place seems like a good bet. She muttered something under her breath and walked out. I didn't ask what she said. Didn't care. The moment the door shut behind her, I stood up, stretched, and got to work. Step one of my plan was already in motion. She was out of the house, and now I had free rein to do what I needed to do. I grabbed my laptop and logged into our shared accounts. Bank, streaming services, the family calendar, everything she used daily. First, I changed every single password. Then I removed her name from every subscription. Then I set up an email filter so that any messages from her would go straight to spam. I moved to the bedroom and opened her nightstand drawer. Pulled out the small velvet box with the bracelet I had given her for our anniversary. A bracelet she had taken off every time she left the house without me. I dropped it in the trash. I checked the closet. Her designer bags, the ones she swore up and down were investments. I grabbed 2 of them, the most expensive ones, and made a mental note to list them for sale later. Consider it a down payment on emotional damages. I wasn't done yet. Chris needed his part. I grabbed my phone and called him. He didn't pick up. Coward. I sent him a text instead. Come by the house. We need to talk. 2 minutes later, he replied. Mike, man, I think we should let things cool off a little. I chuckled. He thought he had a say in this. It's not a request. 15 minutes later, a car pulled up. Chris stepped out, looking like a man who knew he was walking into something ugly but couldn't figure out how to avoid it. He hesitated on the porch, probably wondering if I was waiting behind the door with a baseball bat. Smart guess, but I wasn't going to make things that easy for him. I opened the door and let him in. You want a drink? He shook his head. Mike, listen. I held up a hand. You're going to want to sit down for this. He sat. I sat across from him and placed my phone on the table. You know, Chris, I did some thinking. About loyalty. He swallowed. Mike, I know you're mad, but... I turned my phone around so he could see the screenshot of his little motivational text. Loyalty isn't a word, it's a lifestyle. Deep, man. Real deep. His face drained of color. Come on, Mike. I clicked on another image. A screenshot of his work profile. His job title. His company email. His boss's name. He stiffened. What are you doing? I'm making sure this is a day you'll never forget. I sent the email I had already drafted. Attached the screenshot of his text. The details of what he had been doing behind my back. I wasn't subtle. I made sure it was clear that one of his most valued employees had spent the last year treating his workplace like a dating service. Chris lunged for my phone. I pulled it back. Relax, I said. The email's already gone. His hands clenched into fists. You're ruining my life. I leaned back. No, Chris. You ruined your life. I'm just putting a bow on it. He looked like he wanted to say something, maybe beg, maybe scream. But then his phone buzzed. I saw the name flash across the screen. His boss. He stood up, hands shaking. Mike, please. I shrugged. Like you said, loyalty is a lifestyle. He ran out the door. I sat back and smiled. Not bad for step 1. Liza thought this was over. Chris thought he got off easy. They were both wrong. And I had plenty of time to make sure they knew it. Chris ran out of my house like he was escaping a crime scene. Which, in a way, he was. His phone was ringing nonstop. I imagined his boss wasn't thrilled to get an email detailing how his employee had spent the past year with his best friend's wife. Corporate environments tend to frown on that kind of thing. I closed the door behind him, exhaled, and checked my watch. That took less time than expected. I still had plenty of work to do. First up, Liza's finances. She never paid much attention to the bills. That was my job. She liked to call it division of labor. I called it being financially blind. Either way, it worked in my favor. I logged into our joint bank account. Not for long, though. In a few clicks, I transferred my paycheck into my personal account and then removed my name from the joint one. I had already separated my credit cards earlier, so she was officially on her own. Next, I went to our shared cloud storage. Photos, documents, everything we had saved over the years. I scrolled past the vacation albums, the holiday pictures, the fake smiles in front of Christmas trees. None of it meant anything now. Delete. Gone. I left one folder. The one labeled legal. I figured she might need that when she started asking lawyers stupid questions like, can he actually do this to me? Short answer, yes. I moved on to the house. The mortgage was in my name. She had zero claim to it. She'd been so focused on spending my money that she never thought about securing any real assets for herself. That lack of foresight was now my favorite thing about her. I called a locksmith. How soon can you change all the locks on a house? Tomorrow morning. Perfect. With that handled, I turned my attention to something more entertaining. Liza's social life. She had a habit of posting everything online. Selfies, check-ins, inspirational quotes about trust and self-growth. Now, I had something to post. I opened her Facebook account. She was still logged in on my laptop. Sloppy. I typed out a status update. Exciting news. After a full year of sneaking around with my husband's best friend, I am now pregnant with his child. To celebrate this milestone, I'll be moving out of my husband's house and starting a new chapter in life. One that hopefully comes with some financial planning because I just lost access to all my shared accounts. Wish me luck. I hit post. Then I logged out. Some might call it petty. I called it transparency. Liza was always preaching about being authentic. Now she had a chance to live up to it. I stretched and sat back. This was turning out to be a productive evening. But I wasn't done yet. Chris had been dealt with. Liza's digital footprint was now a disaster. That left only one more thing. Her new future. She thought she was going to land softly. Probably assumed Chris would take her in, play the doting father, maybe even propose. But she didn't know what I knew. Chris wasn't a long-term thinker. And I had proof. I still had access to his old texts. The ones he had sent me while this whole thing was happening. I scrolled back through them. Bro, I swear Liza's been acting weird lately. I love her like a sister, man, but sometimes she's too much. If I was married to her, I'd probably lose my mind. Oh, this was gold. I copied the messages, then sent them to Liza. No explanation, no context, just the raw proof that her new soulmate had been complaining about her behind her back. Within seconds, my phone lit up. Liza calling. Decline. She tried again. Decline. I grabbed another drink, put my feet up, and watched the messages pour in. Liza, Mike, what is this? Liza, where did you get these? Liza, call me now. Liza, you're a monster. Ah, there it was. The victim card. Classic. I set my phone down. I didn't need to respond. She would figure it out soon enough. Chris wasn't her safety net. He was just another mistake waiting to happen. And me? I was already moving on. The house was quiet. For the first time in years, there wasn't a single noise from Liza's constant phone calls. No sound of her walking around complaining about something minor. No fake laughter from another one of her meaningless conversations with her friends. Just silence. I liked it. I checked my phone. Liza had stopped texting about an hour ago. She had gone through the classic cycle. Shock, anger, bargaining, and finally, silence. The last message she sent was simply, "You'll regret this." I smiled. Regret? That was her department now. But I wasn't fully done yet. There was one last piece to handle, the final touch to ensure that everything landed exactly the way I wanted. Chris. I had ruined his job. His boss called me back just to thank me for the information and confirm that, yes, Chris was fired. Turns out his company had some strict policies about workplace affairs. Something about ethics and reputation being important when you work with corporate clients. Who knew? He was unemployed. His relationship with Liza was already starting to crack under the pressure. That wasn't enough for me. He needed one final reality check. I sent him a message, "Meet me at Miller's Bar in an hour." No excuses. He read it immediately but didn't reply. Then, after a long pause, just one word, "Fine." I arrived early, ordered a drink, waited. Chris showed up looking like a man who had been hit by a truck and then backed over for good measure. His hair was a mess, his eyes were bloodshot, and his usual confident, smug attitude was completely gone. He sat down across from me, staring at his hands. "What do you want?" I took a sip. "How's life, Chris?" He exhaled sharply. "I lost my job. I heard. I can't get another one in the industry. Word spreads fast. Unfortunate." "And Liza," he trailed off, rubbing his forehead. I tilted my head. "Trouble in paradise?" He let out a bitter laugh. She's impossible, man. Always nagging, always demanding things. acting like I owe her something. I nodded. You do. You make her pregnant. He let out a dry chuckle. Yeah, about that. I raised an eyebrow. What? He hesitated, then muttered, she told me she's not sure if it's mine. I put my glass down. Say that again? She said, she's not 100% sure. That she had a few things going on before she even started with me. For a moment, I just sat there. Then I laughed. Chris didn't. Oh man, I said, shaking my head. That's tough. You threw away everything for a woman who might have been running a whole operation behind your back. He clenched his jaw. I messed up, Mike. Oh, now you figure it out? I leaned in. Let me ask you something. Was it worth it? Destroying your life, your friendships, your career. For what? A few months of sneaking around like a couple of teenagers? He didn't answer. That's what I thought. The bartender dropped off another drink for me. I raised it slightly. Well, I guess this is the part where I say good luck, but let's be honest, you're fresh out of that. Chris looked like he wanted to say something, maybe beg for forgiveness, maybe blame Liza, maybe just wallow in self-pity. I didn't care. I tossed a few bills on the table, stood up, and walked out. As I stepped into the night air, I felt lighter. The weight of betrayal, anger, and disappointment was gone. Liza and Chris had played their game, and I had finished it for them. Now, it was just me, and I was just getting started. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel,